Yeah, I see you. Yeah, I see you. Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. All right, man. Appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. So I did go ahead and grab a match between Christopher Yu and Wesley So. Christopher Yu is 17-year-old up-and-coming player. It seems like 17 is the magical age, man, because like everybody that was like doing super great, the youngsters now, they just all seem to be 17. So anyways, all of my people coming from the Philippines, I will say, maraming salamat. And anybody else from around the world, I appreciate you very much. But if you guys are ready to go, let's take a look, see what we got for this game, son. All right, so we got E4, Sicilian defense, C5. You guys have seen this probably 5,000 bajillion times. So this is nothing new. For some of you, at least. I don't know. We do see knight to f3. We got d6. And you guys hear me talk about the Sicilian defense all the time. Probably about 90% of the games are going to go in this fashion. You're just going to be trying to control your d4 pawn push if you are white. And you do not want the knight to plop into e5 if you are black. We got d4. We got pawn taking d4, knight taking d4, knight to f6. Knight c3, a6. No, I'm playing. It's the Najdorf variation of the Sicilian, the most heavily analyzed of all Sicilian defenses, probably one of the most heavily, analyzed defenses in the entire world. It is very, very heavy in theory. So we do see bishop to g5, and this is by far one of the main moves. You're basically just giving black a specific threat at the beginning. Do you want to take damage to your pawn structure by developing some other piece, or what do you want to do? We do see the move e6. It was also subtly trying to control this d5 square. Once you do see the move e6, definitely one of the freeing moves for black in any of these Sicilian, Najdorf variations is going to be to push the thematic d5. So e6 is somewhat preparing it. Not quite possible now because, you do have some complications in the center of the board. White is definitely closer to getting castled, and you will see white will definitely get castled very, very quickly. We do see queen going to e2. We got knight b to d7, just double covering that knight on f6, and then we do see castles by white. And like I said, castles is coming, so you definitely don't want to just start opening up the center of the board onto your own king. Don't do it, homie. We do see queen going to c7. We do see the move f4, and then we do see b5. And even though, yes, we did basically get our king into castling, the queen to e2 was definitely making sure that we kept an eye, on this e4 pawn, because as you guys are aware, if you've seen my videos before, b4 is a very thematic pawn push trying to destabilize this central pawn because it is very important for white. We do see the move g4. You are castle queenside, so I mean, let's go on the king side attack. We do see bishop going to b7, bishop to g2, perfectly just in time. We got bishop going to e7. We do see the move e5, and this does very much open up things on this diagonal right. Cheer. So, there's definitely some tactics involved here. We got pawn taking e5, pawn taking e5. We got knight going to d5, bishop taking e7, knight taking c3. So white has definitely gotten themselves a little bit of structural damage. We got pawn taking c3, king taking e7. For Sicilian Najdorf or even like dragon players and stuff, they understand that the doubling of this of these pawns and the openness of this white king is sometimes worth a rook. So a lot of times what you will see is a rook, like so, coming over to c8. And you definitely do see some thematic knight captures on c3 for the knight. Doesn't seem normal, but for Sicilian players, like I said, I mean, you're like, hey, bro, I mean, this is what I'm here for. So we do see bishop taking b7. We got queen taking b7. And then we do have a nice little threat of queen to e3. And there is actually, it doesn't seem like it, but there's actually a lot of pressure in the position. This check is actually quite deadly. And knight taking e6 is actually very deadly. Unfortunately, Wesley So doesn't quite calculate it correctly. He is not really recognizing how deep of a threat this is. So we actually see queen to c7. But you absolutely cannot allow this check and then the follow-up knight taking, which is what we actually see in the game. We got queen going to g5 with check, and this is the novelty. It's crazy how we've seen this position before in the past, and queen to g5 was not played. It's like the most demolishing move in the position. It puts so many threats on the board. I mean, it attacks the king, but it also threatens this g7 pawn. So it's crazy. But like I said, we do see queen going to g5 with check. We got the king backing up to e8. Knight taking, pawn taking. And then now the queen does take on g7. This is what we saw in the game. So if we back up, there was definitely a way for you to just completely avoid all of this. And instead of going queen to c7, pressuring the e5 pawn, you actually can just go king to e8. And this doesn't allow quite the same oomph behind everything. You would probably see queen to g5, but you can just calmly play g6. Rook h would come to f1. But you guys can see that you do not quite have the same captures here. You know, you are just kind of going to be giving up a piece in that particular variation. So going back to what we had in the game, we did see this position here. Bam! And you really don't have a whole lot of moves with your rook on h8. You basically have to go a rook over to f8. And this is not quite ideal, but we actually have reached a position. Black, or actually white, has a very, very nice move. It's kind of like a subtle move, but it has some very serious threats behind it. If you want to go ahead and pause the video and try to guess what move that is, go ahead and do so. Go ahead and do. Okay, so one of the things you should notice if you are white is, yeah, man, this knight and this queen, you know, they're kind of coming together, you know, to attack me on this e5 point, right? Well, how can you make that null and void? You can actually disconnect the connection between this queen and this pawn by going actually rook to d6, and this is absolutely the move that I'm looking for. Not only are you kind of blocking things up just on a simple tip, but I mean, what's going on here? What is we doing with this, homie? Yeah, you're kind of attacking that e6 pawn, and you really don't have any good way to defend it. You're most likely going to see rook to a7, just making sure the queen is held, and then rook h would be coming to d1. And the problem is you have way too many threats here. This is a very, very serious threat. If you do capture here, the only move is here, and then you actually can capture here with checkmate, because this knight would be pinned by this other rook. So it was a really, really nice move, but after we saw rook to f8, we actually saw rook h to f1, and this basically dead evens the game out. We do see the same idea with rook to a7. We got king going over to b2. You know, the king isn't super safe over here, but you kind of don't want to lose one of these pawns. You know, you got to try to keep some cover on you. So we do see the move b4 just really pressing the issue like, hey, man, I want to get your pawns away, bro. We do see rook taking f8. We got knight taking f8, queen taking c7, rook taking, and then we do see pawn taking b4. And yes, as white, you do kind of have some pawns, homie. But, I mean, black definitely has some good legitimate material. They do have two pieces, and they still kind of have three pawns. So, I mean, it's just slightly better for black. So it's not like you writing home to your parents like, hey, mom, I won. No. It is definitely very rough to play for both sides. We do see knight going to d7. You know, you do definitely want to try to attack this pawn. You got to get a little bit more material to feel a little bit more comfortable if you're black. We do see rook going up to d6. So it's really kind of crazy how Christopher Yu in this position, he actually finds that idea. And he's, you know, thinking about taking on e6 or whatever. So, I mean, it's one of them things where he didn't quite think about it at the beginning, but he does kind of come around. Now, don't you hate that? When you play in a game and like you don't see a good move and then like a move or two later, you're like, oh, the great move. It's like, it's gone. It is gone, bro. We do see king going to e7. We got rook taking a6. So that was definitely one of the other things about this specific position is that you were able to take on a6. We do see knight taking e5. We got the move h3. And it's interesting how these pawns are literally all by themselves over here. But, I mean, h3 can come in as soon as you need it to. We do see knight going back to g6. We got the move b5. And, I mean, if you are white, definitely, you have this super gigantic pawn majority over here on the king side, on the queen side. So, I mean, you got to use it, man. Like, that's one of your main strengths. Also, there is a very specific reason why we are pushing this b pawn, and you'll see that in just a second. Rook goes over to b7. We do see the move c4 protecting this pawn. We do see the move e5. We got king up to c3. One of the things about these pawns, as you guys probably are aware, is being in the square of the pawn. So you do kind of somewhat have to keep your king, you know, in a good vicinity of this pawn to make sure that it cannot promote. You cannot stray too far away. We got rook over to d7, and now this is cutting the king off from the protection from trying to attack this pawn. We do see the move b6. We got e4, and then we do see the move rook to a7. And even though you really generally wouldn't want these rooks off the board, in this specific position, it actually would be pretty favorable to get the rooks off the board. And I will show you why coming up in a second. Knight to e5, we do see rook taking d7, king taking d7. We got king going up to d4, attacking this knight. Kind of attacking the knight because you can't capture this knight like this because this pawn is just going to run away. So the knight is actually very safe on that square. We do see the move e3. That's why we see e3, because you're basically like, hey man, you can take my knight if you want to, but then you're going to be down a queen. So we do absolutely take on e3. Now, at the end of the day, there was an alternate move, but there's a very big reason why it wasn't quite as good as this move. So when you think about it, king takes e3 was really kind of forced. So we do see king to e3, knight takes c4 with check, the king goes up to f4, and then we do see knight taking b6. And remember this position, I'm going to like show another position in a second. Okay. So instead of king taking c3, the only other option was going here. Basically delaying the capturing of this pawn, still staying in the square, three, moves away, and just kind of postponing it and making sure that we can, still try to kind of hold this pawn. You would have seen the move e2, and then this would force you down, and then you would be in a very similar position. But notice the difference in the king. So it's the identical position, but this king was over here before. So that is why this is just slightly inferior to what we actually saw in the game. So we did see this position here, and then the knight did take on b6. We got king going up to g5. Then we do see knight to d5. Now, this is the most important feature of this endgame. You see that white is down a little bit of material, like as far as like minor pieces and stuff is concerned. The interesting issue that black has is that either this knight or this king has to stay in somewhat of the vicinity of this pawn because it is so outside past. It is on the complete edge of the board. So that means that you either have to choose between, kind of keeping your king in this general area, making sure that it doesn't promote because it does have these two moves at the beginning. So you have to remember that. Or you want to just keep your knight, kind of hanging over in this section right here. The problem is it only leaves you with one other piece that you can kind of go and, make sure that these pawns and stuff aren't promoting. And it's really, really kind of hard to do. We do see the move king to h6. We actually see the move knight to f6. And you see the bar. This actually is very, very good for Christopher Yu. The problem is you're going to be able to start continuously pushing your pawns and moving this knight out of the way. We do see king going to g7. We got knight going down to e4. And we actually see the move h4. And it is in this position that Wesley So resigns the game. So let me show you the only variation that would have absolutely worked and held the position. And it is a very, very hard thing to find. There is a lot of calculation that has to come into this variation. You would first have to go knight to f4. So basically what you spend a bunch of moves on is continuously attacking white's pawns. You see that this first knight move attacks this backward pawn on h3. You would have to push it to h4. You would have knight to g6, and this would be further attacking. And it's just weird how the knight is able to just every single move attack these pawns. You would probably see something like h5. The knight would go to e5, and you see that now that's a perfect move to to attack the pawn on g4. You would see the move g5, knight going to f7 with check, and this is actually forcing the king now away from the protection of that pawn. So this was the only try. The king would take here, and then you got knight taking g5 with check, and basically you're going to make sure that this king, kind of hangs out in this corner right here, as far as rook pawns go, and this knight is going to gladly give itself up for this pawn whenever necessary. So that is going to be a complete draw, completely holdable by both sides. So going back to the position that we actually had. In this position here. So you kind of have an idea based on what I explained as to like why, you kind of need to, keep a piece over here. Like the king is probably going to be over here. The knight is trying to kind of, protect both of these pieces. The problem is the way that the knight is actually placed right now, you are not going to be able to be in a position to sacrifice yourself for both of the pawns. And king takes h7 is going to inevitably come. So if we go just a little further, you would possibly see king to c6, like I said, holding that queen side right there. But you would actually be seeing the move g5. And now this move g5 perfectly allows you to capture this pawn without giving up a knight to f6 check fork, because you saw that before. If you did just go immediately and take the pawn, you would be looking at this, and then you would get into the position before where it's a dead draw. So this is not a dead draw because, like I said, g5 is going to come, and you don't have any way now to attack this king once it takes, and you are not going to be able to give this knight up for both of these pawns. So you will have pawns on complete opposite sides of the board, making it, to victory. And like I said, after the move g5, you don't have anywhere to move this knight to try to attack any of these pawns further. And you're just going to have to take at least 2 or 3 tempi to try to get into a specific position. So understanding all of this stuff, even back in this position here, it is this point when Wesley So does resign the game. So Malaka C. Christopher Yu. So he's just a gangster 17-year-old. I mean, it was a nice game. I mean, definitely, both sides had some chances and stuff like that. So, but I appreciate everybody very much for stopping by. And before I forget, I had somebody, ask me to speak Cebuano. So I will say, Maayong buntag, kamusta na higala. I appreciate everybody very much for stopping by. If you do speak Cebuano yourself, that's kind of all I know. There's another phrase that I know. I have it written down, but I can't remember it exactly. But yeah, I appreciate everybody very much from anywhere in the Philippines and anywhere around the world. And I'm gonna see you guys next time.